Ethan had always dreamed of seeing the stars up close. Since he was a child, he had read about faraway planets, strange life forms, and worlds that no human had ever stepped on. Years of studying science finally brought him to the moment he had been waiting for. He was chosen to be part of a small research team sent on a peaceful exploration mission to a distant star system. It was not just about collecting samples or taking pictures. It was about building trust and friendship with a civilization far more advanced than Earth. The journey was long, but when their ship finally approached the alien planet, Ethan couldn't take his eyes off the view outside the window. The world glowed in shades of silver and blue, with crystal-like mountains and seas that shimmered like liquid light. It was unlike anything he had ever imagined. The human team landed in the capital city, where tall, graceful towers reached into the sky, connected by bridges that seemed to float in the air. The air was fresh, almost sweet, and the soft golden light made everything look like a dream. The first day was filled with formal greetings. The alien people, known as the Serenians, were tall, elegant beings with soft, luminous skin and eyes that changed color depending on their mood. They moved with quiet grace, their voices calm and melodic. Among the welcoming party stood the royal family. At the center was Queen Serenia, her presence strong yet gentle, and beside her was her daughter, Princess Liara. She was dressed in flowing robes that shimmered when she moved, her eyes glowing with a curious light. When Ethan's eyes met Liara's, for the first time it was only for a moment, but something about it felt strange, like she was studying him, as if trying to understand him in a way no one else had ever done. He gave her a polite smile and bowed slightly, the way the cultural guide had taught them. She didn't speak, only tilted her head as though she was making a quiet decision in her mind. Later that evening, there was a grand diplomatic gathering in the palace. The hall was enormous, lit by floating orbs that glowed in warm colors. The tables were filled with exotic foods, delicate crystal fruits that sparkled when cut open, drinks that changed flavor with every sip, and breads as soft as clouds. Ethan was nervous. He had been told that every word, every gesture, would be remembered by their hosts. While most of the human team kept close to each other, Ethan wandered a little, wanting to see more of the palace. That's when Liara approached him. She stood quietly for a few seconds before speaking. "You are Ethan," she said softly. Her voice was calm but carried a strange energy, like she had been waiting for this moment. "Yes, Your Highness," Ethan replied, trying to be respectful. "I have never met a human before," she said, her eyes changing to a gentle shade of blue. "You are different." Ethan smiled politely, unsure what she meant. "I hope that's a good thing." She tilted her head again, studying his face. "It is. You are smaller than I thought, but your eyes, they are full of thought." It was an unusual comment, but Ethan could tell she meant it as a compliment. They spoke for a while, about his home, his journey, and his work. Liara listened with deep interest, asking questions about things most people would overlook, like what the rain felt like on Earth, or how it felt to see the sun rise from his own planet. Ethan found her curiosity refreshing, though he assumed it was simply because he was a novelty to her. As the night went on, Liara excused herself, but not before telling him, "I will see you again." Her words stayed in his mind long after she left. The next few days were filled with diplomatic talks and cultural exchanges. The humans shared knowledge about Earth's history, art, and science, while the Serenians demonstrated their technology and traditions. But whenever there was a break, Ethan would notice Liara nearby. Sometimes she would walk past him without speaking, just watching him with an unreadable expression. Other times, she would start small conversations that seemed to have no real purpose, like asking about the color of the sky on Earth or whether he liked the way Serenian gardens smelled. Ethan didn't think much of it. He assumed she was simply being friendly or practicing diplomacy. But what he didn't know was that to Liara, these moments meant far more. She was beginning to see him not as a visitor, but as someone she wanted to understand, someone who stirred feelings she couldn't quite name. One afternoon, during a tour of the royal gardens, Liara appeared again. She walked beside Ethan, pointing out rare plants and explaining their history. At one point, she reached out and plucked a small, glowing flower, placing it in his hand. "This flower opens only once every 10 years, she said. "Now it will open for you." Ethan looked at the delicate petals, unsure why she would give him something so rare. "Thank you," he said sincerely. She smiled faintly, but there was something more in her eyes, a silent promise, or maybe a question she hadn't yet asked. What Ethan didn't realize was that this was only the beginning. Liara's interest was not fading. In fact, with each passing day, it was growing stronger, and soon it would lead to a moment that would change both of their lives forever. From the day they first spoke, Princess Liara found herself thinking about Ethan far more than she expected. At first, she told herself it was only curiosity. He was a visitor from a faraway world, a rare sight in her people's long history. But as the days passed, she began to realize that her interest was not fading. Instead, it was deepening. Every morning when she woke, her first thought was whether she would see him that day. She often made sure her duties in the palace took her near the places where the human guests stayed. Sometimes she would pass him in the corridors, pretending she just happened to be there. Other times, she arranged small activities that she could invite him to, events that sounded formal, but were really just ways to spend more time with him. One afternoon, Liara sent a formal request to Ethan's team, inviting him to visit the Royal Library. It was the largest collection of knowledge in her world, filled with tall shelves of crystal tablets that glowed softly with stored information. Ethan accepted the invitation, thinking it was part of a cultural exchange. When he arrived, she was waiting for him near the entrance, wearing a simple robe instead of her usual ceremonial clothes. "This is my favorite place in the palace," she told him as they walked between the shelves. "When I was young, I would hide here for hours, reading about other worlds." Ethan ran his fingers gently along the edge of one glowing tablet. "It's beautiful," he said. "On Earth, our libraries have paper books or digital screens, but nothing like this." They spent hours there. Liara showed him stories from her people's ancient past, tales of explorers, poets, and inventors. Ethan listened with interest, asking questions that made her smile. Unlike many others she spoke to, he wasn't just polite. He was genuinely curious, and that curiosity felt warm and alive. Over the next few days, Liara found more reasons to see him. She invited him to a cultural exhibition where Serenian musicians played instruments that looked like strands of glowing light. She took him to a private garden where rare birds sang melodies that echoed like wind chimes. Ethan enjoyed each experience, though he still believed these invitations were part of the official hospitality offered to all human guests. But to Liara, they were more than that. Every time she saw him smile or heard him laugh, she felt a strange joy she had never experienced before. She had met many people in her life, ambassadors, nobles, scholars, but none of them had made her feel this way. Ethan was not trying to impress her. He simply listened, spoke honestly, and treated her as if she were just another person, not a princess. One evening, Liara sat with her mother, Queen Serenia, in the royal chambers. The queen noticed the faraway look in her daughter's eyes. "You have been distracted lately," she said softly. "Is something on your mind?" Liara hesitated, unsure if she should speak so soon. There is a human in the visiting team, she said finally. His name is Ethan. Queen Serenia raised an eyebrow. Yes, I have heard of him. Your voice changes when you speak his name. Liara looked away, her cheeks warming slightly. He is different. He is not like the others. He asks questions no one else thinks to ask. He notices the small things. He listens. The queen smiled faintly. Curiosity is natural, Liara. But remember, humans are fragile compared to us. Their lives are short. Their ways are not our ways. I know, Liara said quickly. But still, I want to understand him more. The queen did not answer right away. Instead, she simply nodded, leaving the matter for another day. In the following week, Liara's feelings only grew stronger. She noticed little things about Ethan, how his eyes brightened when he learned something new, how he treated the palace staff with respect, how he sometimes stayed quiet during meetings but spoke with surprising wisdom when he did share his thoughts. She began to wonder if she was the only one seeing these things, or if others noticed them too. One morning, she invited him to join her on a short journey outside the city. They traveled in a smooth, silent craft over fields of silver grass and rivers that glowed faintly at night. Their destination was a hill that overlooked the sea. From there, the water stretched endlessly, shimmering under the soft light of the planet's twin moons. It's beautiful, Ethan said quietly, standing beside her. Liara turned to look at him instead of the view. Yes, she replied. It is. They stood there in silence for a while, the wind brushing gently against them. Liara wanted to tell him that she enjoyed his company more than anyone else's. She wanted to ask if he felt the same, but she held back, afraid of what he might say. When they returned to the palace, Ethan thanked her for the trip. I don't think I'll ever forget that view, he said. Neither will I, she thought. But she didn't say it aloud. By now, Liara knew her feelings were no longer simple curiosity. She found herself imagining what it would be like if Ethan stayed on her world, if they could walk through the gardens together every day, if they could share stories in the library until the moons rose high. It was a thought that both excited and frightened her. And yet, she also knew one thing for certain. If she did nothing, if she let him return to Earth without telling him how she felt, she would regret it for the rest of her life. Soon, she decided, she would have to speak to her mother again. This time, she would not hide behind vague words or soft hints. She would tell her the truth. Because what Liara felt now was not just interest or admiration. It was something deeper, something that made her heart race whenever Ethan was near, something that made her want to protect him, understand him, and never let him go. And she was ready to do whatever it took to make sure he stayed. Liara waited for the right moment to speak to her mother. She knew Queen Serenia was busy with political meetings and diplomatic arrangements for the human visitors. The queen was wise and fair, but she also valued traditions, and Liara's request would be unlike anything the royal family had faced before. Several days passed before that moment finally came. It was late in the evening, after the palace halls had grown quiet. The moonlight poured through the tall windows, casting soft silver light across the royal sitting room. Queen Serenia was seated near the great balcony, reading a glowing crystal tablet. Liara approached slowly, her heart beating faster with every step. "Mother," she said softly. The queen looked up, her calm eyes resting on her daughter. "Liara, you seem troubled. Sit with me." Liara sat down beside her, her hands resting tightly in her lap. For a long moment she didn't speak. She had rehearsed her words in her mind many times, but now, facing her mother, they felt heavy and difficult to release. Finally, she took a deep breath. "Mother, I need to speak to you about someone important to me." The queen set the tablet aside, giving her full attention. "Go on." Liara's eyes met her mother's, and she said the words she had been holding back. "Mother, I want this human." Her voice trembled slightly, but her gaze did not waver. For a moment, Queen Serenia was silent. "This human?" she asked, carefully. "His name is Ethan," Liara said. "He is part of the visiting team. I have spent time with him, spoken with him, learned from him. He is unlike anyone I have met before." The Queen's expression was unreadable. "Liara, you have known him for only a short time. Is this fascination or something deeper?" Liara's voice grew steadier as she answered. "It is more than fascination. He is thoughtful, kind, and curious. He does not see me as only a princess. He speaks to me as a person. He listens when I talk, and he notices things about our world that even our own people overlook. He makes me feel alive in a way I have never felt before." The Queen leaned back slightly, her eyes narrowing in thought. "You know the challenges, Liara. Humans live far shorter lives than we do. Their bodies are fragile. Their ways are different from ours. If you bind yourself to him, you may face loss sooner than you wish." "I have thought of that," Liara admitted. "But what is the value of a long life if it is lived without the people who make it meaningful? I would rather have fewer years with someone who matters to me than many years with someone I do not care for." Her words hung in the air. The Queen studied her daughter closely, searching for any sign of uncertainty. But Liara's eyes were clear. "You speak with great feeling," Queen Serenia said at last. "But feelings can change. What if his interest in you fades? What if he wishes to return to his world?" Liara hesitated, then replied, "If he chooses to leave, I will let him go, but I must at least give him the choice to stay. If I remain silent, I will always wonder what could have been. Mother, I am not asking for you to force him to stay. I am asking for your permission to tell him how I feel and to offer him a place here, by my side." The Queen rose from her seat and walked to the balcony, gazing out at the city lights that shimmered like a sea of stars. Liara followed her, standing a few steps behind. "When I was young," the Queen began, her voice soft, "I too met someone from beyond our world. He was brave, full of wonder, and his life was bright, but brief. I still think of him sometimes. Perhaps that is why I am cautious. I do not wish for you to face that pain." Liara stepped closer. "I understand, Mother, but is avoiding pain worth giving up the chance for joy?" The Queen turned to look at her, the faintest smile touching her lips. "You have your father's spirit. He would have said the same." They stood in silence for a long moment, the wind carrying the distant sounds of the city below. Finally, Queen Serenia spoke again. "Very well, Liara. I will not forbid you from speaking your heart, but I must meet this Ethan myself, and I must know his intentions. If he agrees to stay, it must be his choice, freely made, with full understanding of what it means." Relief washed over Liara. She bowed her head respectfully. "Thank you, Mother." "Do not thank me yet," the Queen said gently. "This path may not be as easy as you hope." Liara understood. There were still many uncertainties. Ethan might not feel the same way, or he might be unwilling to leave his homeworld. But now she had her mother's permission, and that gave her courage. That night, as she returned to her chambers, she thought about how she would speak to Ethan. She knew she could not rush it. She would wait for the right moment, one where she could speak honestly, without pressure or fear. And deep inside, she began to imagine what life might be like if he said yes, walking together in the gardens, exploring the endless knowledge, in the library, watching the twin moons rise over the sea. It was a fragile hope, but it was hers. In the days to come, the Queen would summon Ethan for a private meeting, and Liara knew that would be the moment everything changed. 2 days after her conversation with Liara, Queen Serenia sent a formal message to the human delegation. The note was brief, but clear. She wished to speak to Ethan in private. The request surprised him. He had been careful to follow all diplomatic rules and hadn't expected to draw the Queen's personal attention. Still, he accepted immediately. The meeting was arranged for the late afternoon in one of the quieter wings of the palace. Ethan was escorted through tall, arched hallways decorated with crystal lights that glowed like gentle stars. He tried to stay calm, but he could feel a slight unease in his stomach. Meeting the ruler of another world was no small thing, especially when he didn't know why she wanted to see him. When he entered the audience chamber, he found Queen Serenia seated by a wide window that overlooked the city. The soft glow of the twin moons was beginning to rise, casting silver light across the room. She was dressed simply, without the heavy ceremonial crown, but her presence was still powerful. "Ethan," she said, her voice warm yet formal. "Please, sit." He bowed slightly, as was their custom, and took the seat across from her. "Your Majesty, it's an honor to meet you like this." The Queen studied him for a moment before speaking again. "I have heard much about you from my daughter." Ethan felt a flicker of surprise. "From Princess Liara?" "Yes," Serenia replied. "She speaks of your conversations, the places you have visited together, and the questions you ask. She says you see the beauty in small things, things that even our own people sometimes overlook." Ethan shifted slightly in his seat, unsure how to respond. I've enjoyed her company very much. She has been incredibly kind to me." The Queen's eyes remained fixed on him. "Liara is dear to me, Ethan. She is not only my daughter but also my heir. Her choices carry weight, not only for herself but for our entire people. So I must understand who it is she spends her time with." Ethan nodded slowly. "I understand." For a while, the Queen asked questions, some about him, some about Earth. She wanted to know what his life had been like before this journey, what he valued most, and how he handled challenges. She listened carefully to his answers, never interrupting, but watching him closely as if measuring his truthfulness. "Tell me," she said at one point, "what do you think of our world?" Ethan glanced toward the window, where the city shimmered, like a galaxy on the ground. "It's breathtaking, but more than that, it feels alive. I've never seen a place where nature and technology blend so perfectly. Everything here seems to exist in harmony." "And what of my daughter?" the Queen asked, her tone calm but serious. Ethan hesitated. "She's remarkable, intelligent, curious. She has a way of making people feel seen. I've learned more about your culture from her than from any guide or briefing." The Queen's gaze softened slightly, but she didn't smile. "You speak with respect, but do you understand what it would mean if you stayed here? This is not Earth. Our lives are longer, our customs different. You would be far from your people, your language, your home." Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "I know it would be a huge change, and honestly, I'm not sure I fully understand yet what it would mean, but I've always believed that life is about more than comfort. It's about connections. If there's a chance to build something meaningful here, I'd want to try." Serenia leaned back slightly, studying him. "You answer with honesty. That is rare." There was a pause before she continued. "Liara cares for you, Ethan, more than she has cared for anyone before. She has asked me to allow you to remain here, to live among us, not as a visitor, but as part of our world. I will not make this choice for you. It must be yours." Ethan was silent for a moment. He hadn't expected to hear such a direct statement. "I didn't realize," he admitted. I knew she was kind to me, but I didn't think—" He stopped, trying to find the right words. "This is a lot to take in." The Queen's eyes softened just slightly. "I do not expect you to decide tonight. But know this: if you choose to stay, it will not be without challenges. You will need to learn our ways, adapt to our customs, and accept that your life here will be unlike anything you have known before. But if your choice is sincere, I will give you my blessing." Ethan felt a strange mix of emotions: honor, confusion, curiosity, and a spark of something warmer that he didn't fully understand. "I'll need time to think," he said quietly. "You shall have it," Serenia replied. She rose from her seat, and Ethan stood as well. "Whatever you decide, let it be from your heart, not from fear or obligation." As he left the chamber, Ethan's thoughts were racing. He had come here as a scientist, an explorer, but now he found himself at a crossroads he had never imagined. Part of him longed for the familiar life he had left behind on Earth. Yet another part felt drawn to this world, to its beauty, and to Liara herself. In her private chambers, Liara waited anxiously for news of the meeting. When her mother returned, the Queen simply said, "He is thoughtful, but the choice is his." Liara's heart tightened. It wasn't a promise, but it wasn't a refusal either. It was hope, and hope, she told herself, was enough to hold on to for now. That night, as the twin moons cast their silver glow over the city, Ethan lay awake in his guest quarters. He thought about the first moment he met Liara, about the way she looked at him, about the quiet moments they had shared. The decision ahead was not simple, but he knew one thing for certain: his life would never be the same again. Ethan spent the next few days in quiet thought. He still joined the rest of the human delegation for meetings and cultural visits, but his mind kept drifting back to the conversation with Queen Serenia. Her words had been clear. If he stayed, it had to be his choice, not because of pressure or duty. He thought of Earth, his family, his friends, the familiar streets and skies he had grown up with. He thought of his work, the projects he had planned, the life he had carefully built. All of that was safe, known, and within reach if he simply returned with the others. But then he thought of Liara. He remembered their walks through the gardens, the way her eyes lit up when she spoke of her people's history, the way she listened to him as if every word mattered. He remembered the rare, glowing flower she had placed in his hand, telling him it would only open for him. He remembered the sea under the twin moons and how she had looked at him in that quiet moment. One evening, Ethan wandered alone to the palace gardens. The air was cool, carrying the scent of the strange silver-blossomed trees. He sat by a small pool where ripples reflected the soft lights above. He imagined Liara walking beside him, and without realizing it, he smiled. That was when he knew. The thought of leaving her, of walking away from the possibility of what they could share, was far harder than the idea of staying in a new world. The unknown no longer felt frightening. It felt like an adventure worth taking. The next morning, he sent a request to meet Queen Serenia again. She agreed, and the meeting was set for that afternoon. Liara, though not told the details, sensed something was different and waited anxiously in her chambers. When Ethan entered the Queen's audience chamber, he felt the same quiet strength in her presence as before. She looked at him steadily, as if she already knew why he had come. "Ethan," she said, "have you reached your decision?" He took a deep breath. "Yes, Your Majesty, I have." The Queen gestured for him to speak. "I've thought about my life on Earth and what it would mean to leave it behind. I've thought about your world, its beauty, its challenges, its differences from my own. And I've thought about Liara. I can't pretend to know exactly what the future will bring, but I know I don't want to walk away from the chance to share it with her. I want to stay. For a moment, the queen studied him without speaking. Then, slowly, she nodded. You speak with clarity, and I believe your words are sincere. Ethan felt the tension in his chest ease slightly. I can't promise I won't make mistakes as I learn, but I'll do everything I can to understand your people and your ways. That, the queen replied, is all I ask. A true bond is built on understanding and respect, not on perfection. She rose from her seat. Then it is settled. You will remain here as a welcomed member of our people. Ethan bowed respectfully, relief and gratitude filling him. Thank you, Your Majesty. Before the day ended, Liara was told of Ethan's decision. She hurried to find him in the gardens, her steps light and quick. When she saw him standing, by the same pool where he had sat the night before, she stopped for a moment, almost unable to believe it. You're staying, she said softly. He turned toward her, smiling. I'm staying. For the first time since they met, Liara's composure broke into pure, unguarded joy. She stepped closer, her eyes glowing with that gentle blue light he had come to recognize. I thought maybe you would choose to leave, but I hoped... She stopped, her voice catching slightly. I'm glad my hope was not wasted. They walked together through the garden paths, speaking of all the things they might do now. Places she wanted to show him, stories she wanted to tell, things they would discover together. Ethan felt lighter than he had in years, as if choosing. This uncertain path had somehow freed him. Over the following weeks, Ethan began adjusting to life among the Saranians. He learned their customs, their greetings, the rhythm of their days. Some things were difficult, understanding their complex festivals, getting used to the taste of certain foods, or speaking their language without an accent. But Liara was patient, guiding him with quiet encouragement. The human delegation eventually prepared to return to Earth. There were goodbyes, handshakes, and promises to send messages across the stars. Ethan watched his fellow humans board the ship, knowing he was stepping into a completely different life. As the ship rose into the sky and disappeared among the stars, Liara stood beside him. Do you miss it already? She asked. Ethan looked at her, then at the glowing city below. I'll always remember it. But right now, this feels like home. Her expression softened, and for a moment they stood in silence, watching the sky, together. From then on, their days were filled with both learning and laughter. They explored hidden parts of the palace, visited distant valleys where the rivers sang, and spent quiet evenings in the library reading side by side. Each day brought something new, and each moment deepened the bond between them. Ethan knew the future would not always be easy. There would be challenges to face, differences to bridge, misunderstandings to overcome, and moments of doubt. But he also knew they would face them together, and that was enough. One night, as they stood on the balcony watching the twin moons rise, Liara glanced at him with a small smile. When I told my mother I wanted you, I didn't know if I could convince her, or you. But now you're here. And I'm not leaving, Ethan replied. The wind carried the scent of the gardens below, and the city's lights shimmered in the distance. In that moment, both of them understood that this was not the end of their story. It was the beginning of something greater than either had imagined. And so, on a world far from the one where Ethan was born, under the light of two moons, a new chapter of their lives quietly began.